It's been a while since I've done a Hyperion video. If you're unfamiliar, Hyperion is a project to bring back the old Philips Ambilight feature, where your TV displays colors on the wall behind it that stretch far beyond the physical screen. It's a very immersive experience, and I've done a few videos about this project. Now, a lot has changed since those videos, so today we're going to install LEDs on the back of an older 32-inch TV. Now, I've shown this process in the past on a 55-inch, but like I said, a lot has changed, so I figured it was time to revisit this beginner-friendly, no soldering required method of adding Hyperion to your television. Hey guys, button in real quick. If you're new here, this is Justin Nelson's Projects, and I welcome you to the channel. I do everything from electronics to 3D printing, automotive, you name it. If it's a project, I film it and make a video out of it. If you're here for the Hyperion video, make sure you stick around all the way to the end. I've got a bunch of tips and pointers and answers to questions I always get whenever I post a Hyperion or Ambilight related video. Everything from Dolby Atmos to what kind of splitter should I use, it's all at the end of this video. So make sure you stick around. So now back to what I recorded previously. I actually use and recommend HyperHDR. It's a fork of Hyperion, but you will find me use the term Hyperion throughout this video as a generic term for this type of project. As long as you're using my level shifter kit, the only tool that you might need is a pair of household scissors. Links to all the required hardware are down below in the description and on my website. Today, I'm doing this on a small TV, mostly because my two larger TVs already have Hyperion installed, but the smaller TV also makes it easier to demonstrate on video. This particular TV is configured as a wall mount, but the same steps apply to just about any flat screen television. You're going to want to lay the TV face down on a stable, soft surface, such as a bed or a couch, and then follow along with the next section. If you don't have your hardware just yet, go ahead and watch the next section so you can see just how easy this project really can be. With that out of the way, let's breathe new life into this old, non-smart Vizio. This right here is everything we need to do a Hyperion install on a 32-inch television. We have, of course, an old Vizio 32-inch TV, and today we're going to use the SK6812 RGBW LED. It works exactly the same as a 2812B, except it adds a white LED to each pixel. Now, this is just a 1080 TV, so we're going to use a little Roku guy here. We're going to use a Raspberry Pi 02W with a nice little heat sink on there. We are going to use our recommended HDMI splitter. These are our corner brackets that you get as part of the accessories bundle with my level shifter, as well as the power injection coupler crimp connector. There is my recommended HDMI capture device, and of course, the star of the show, our LED strips. Now what we need to do is figure out how exactly we want to mount these and where our starting point is going to be. Well, since the HDMI inputs are on this side on this television, we're going to kind of put everything right about here, so this will be our input corner. One issue that we're dealing with is this cutout. So how do we get around that? There are a few methods, but we're going to go the easy way and just run it down here and go ahead and leap up over to the top of the television. We'll start here and we'll end at the same point over here. We want to be over the vents here, or we could run right down the middle. It's kind of a spot there. I like to be not right on the edge of the television, so let's do that. So I think where my finger is, that's where we're going to cut. I'm going to cut this, and make sure you cut right in the center of those pads. Now, that leaves us with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 20, 22 LEDs. Let's go ahead and measure out for the other side, and the simplest way to do that is line it up with the piece you just cut. But remember how many LEDs, you'll need to know that number later. And remember, the arrows need to point in the direction of the data flow, so flip that around, set that aside. So let's go ahead and get our first L connector ready. You gotta have a nail or something to get these open. They're a little funny, a little finicky. So what I'm doing next here is trying to pull a little bit of the glue itself off. That way it will actually go into the connector without having to fight it so much. So just a little bit of the adhesive and the backing is now removed. Enough, hopefully, to where we can slide that under those little white tabs and then get it under the silver tabs where it needs to make the connection. So that's what you're looking for. Then you're going to click that down, and hopefully you heard that nice little snap. Probably not, because the microphone is on my shirt. Now next up, we know we want this to line up with this guy here. But as far as left and right, I'm I'm just gonna eyeball this. So we're sticking out about 2 LEDs from the edge of the vent. So basically where my thumbnail is over here is where I want to cut this. Once again, right down the center. And once again, we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we've got 38 across. That means we also want 38 for the bottom row. And once again, we're going to use this trick. And look at that, it just happens to be on a factory solder joint. When these come from the factory, they're made in certain lengths and then soldered together and rolled up. Doesn't matter, our scissors will cut right through it. Just make sure you have good scissors. So we have a top, a bottom, a left, and a right. Put the rest of this away for safekeeping. So let's start by adhering our top piece. Remember, the arrows always need to point from our input side. So it's coming up and over. So those little arrows you see on the actual strip need to point this way in our case. Before we go and stick this down, we're going to go ahead and peel off some of the adhesive and backing and get both corners on first. So this is going to that side there. Again, under these little white tabs that help guide it, and then under the silver tabs, and then you can feel it click. And on this side, of course, we're connecting to our input. So with both corners on, let us peel the blue part away. We were wanting to center this basically in that little ridge on this particular TV. We're trying to line it up, and yes, I'm a little far away, but you'll see in the end that it actually looks better than if you go all the way to the edge. And we can go ahead and get our input side here nailed down. And remember, this is the one we're kind of gonna be a little tricky with. I'm gonna leave that hang a little bit. You can't really see, but my HDMI port starts right here. HDMI 1 is right here where my finger is, so that's where I need this to be all the way down. We can let that rise up that little ramp there, but just make sure the television is thoroughly clean before you start. So let's go ahead and get this next row, and again, we'll go ahead and peel both adhesive and the backing on both ends. That's where it's easy to forget which side is which, so just always use those arrows. Our downward facing arrow is going into our final L bracket, and it's going to go back that way toward the input. So we're going to take this and basically try to just have a nice straight line all the way down to here, and we will get our bottom row. It does help to have a little bit of fingernails, so maybe don't cut your nails for a few days while you wait for everything to arrive that you ordered. Luckily, we didn't land where a solder joint is having to go into a corner connector, because this is our, actually, yeah, we kind of did. This is gonna go into our little shark bite connector. This was just a heck of a coincidence, but you know, I'm almost glad that happened. Since this is a smaller TV, I'm gonna just take another strip of this. Now, if you had a larger TV and this happened, try to catch it before you cut it, and just cut one more and cut one off the other end. That's what I should have done. Don't worry, they won't go to waste. They'll end up in some other project, I'm sure of it. But hold on. I'm not gonna cut that yet, because don't we have a solder joint on this end as well? So we're gonna go ahead and take one more LED and cut there, so that we can cut off the one with the solder joint. Now normally I would just solder wires on there, but I'm trying to show how to do this the easy way. Just to double check we got our length correct. So same length as the top. So once again, oh, I knew that wasn't gonna last. So, arrows pointing this way, this way, this way. Now we need to go this way. So, our arrows are going that way. We're gonna go ahead and get this in here, same as the other few. Now this part I probably should have done before I did that, but when you get this connector, there's a short side and a longer side. The shorter side here is of course for the LED strip. Now you may have to bend this a little unnaturally back, and then you want to line that up so that those get punctured, and then you click it down and kind of see where it punctured that real nicely. So we're gonna go right over our power cord. This is not a removable power cord. So we are covering the vents just ever so slightly, I'm not all that concerned. There we are. The LEDs are mounted, but there's one more thing. Now, this is very detailed on my website, but on the LED strip, you've got plus 5 volts and ground. So these two extra wires, we want this on the plus 5 volt side. You're just going to push it in pretty much till it stops, and the white wire, most importantly, we're skipping the middle wire. We don't need a green data wire on this. And if you want, you can very carefully use some kind of pliers until that click. Now, if you want, you can use a little bit of double-sided tape or something, but for now, we're gonna move on to the next steps. With that said, let me move the camera into a safer place. Okay guys, I feel a lot safer about this setup. You guys are now just on the tripod sitting on the television. You'll notice a little ramp there. Before we go sticking anything to the TV, let's get everything wired up, everything hooked up. So we know this is plugging into here. This is our level shifter, and it plugs in directly to the LED strip. And it provides power from our big 10 amp power supply. Now you'll need a 10 or maybe 15 amp supply depending on how large your TV is, but we'll hook that up last. What we're trying to do is find a nice way to lay everything out so that it's kind of nice and neat and behind the wall mount bracket. You don't have to worry so much about that if you're not wall mounting. Now, again, pictures on the website show this in far more detail, but on the Raspberry Pi, if you're holding it this way with the pin header up and to your right, on the 0W, the SD card is on this side. So on your right, you're gonna count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on the 6th pin, put our green wire, and the very next pin on the far right is our ground wire. Now that provides the data to the level shifter, which then steps it up to 5 volts to drive the LED strip. Speaking of powering things, we also need to power the Raspberry Pi, and that's why my level shifter comes with not one but 2 Type A USB ports. And when you order one of these, you get your choice of a micro or a Type C, depending on what kind of Raspberry Pi you plan to use. What next? Well, we've got a capture device here, and we've got our OTG cable. We'll go ahead and plug that into the other USB port. The bottom one, or the one closest to the edge, is your power, and the other one is your actual USB port. So HDMI out number 2, the second HDMI out, goes to our capture device. We need another to go to the television, so this goes to HDMI out number 1. Now normally your source device might be a streaming box of some sort. I've got a little Roku, so I'm going to use another really short HDMI cable for my input. I may just let this hang down for the demonstration here, but this is our input device. Now this needs power too. It came with a Type C to Type A, as most splitters do, cable, and we're going to use that other port, that handy little port I included on the level shifter, to power this. And we can neaten these up later with twist ties. And our Roku also needs 5 volt power. Almost every TV I've ever seen has a USB port on it. So everything's got power. Everything is connected. The only thing to do now is try to organize this a little bit. And that's why I throw in one big old square of off-brand Velcro. Let's start with the splitter. Let's get a decent sized piece. I like to leave it stuck together and just treat it like double-sided tape. And if you care what it looks like, go ahead and get kind of fun with organizing, but if you're just gonna hang it and forget it, like I'm gonna do, just kind of stick it wherever it'll fit. We're gonna take some other pieces of this. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this into some smaller bits. I'm gonna use a really small bit for the level shifter, but we're not going to put it on just yet. I want to get the Pi probably right about here. Oh yeah, and you'll notice I'm using the hammer-on solderless pins. Check up there for a card to a video on those. You can of course buy the Pi Zero with the headers already soldered on. We're going to Velcro that guy right there. Now you'll notice I'm not paying attention to which side is hook and which side is loop, because I really don't care. I'm just sticking it wherever it'll go. And the Roku, I'm just gonna sort of put it right here. We're at the bottom of the TV, and it's sticking down ever so slightly. I'm gonna just tape with some gaffer tape these cables right here just a little bit so that sticks down just enough for the remote to see it. Sadly, the remote is bigger than the actual streaming device in this case. Oh yeah, don't we have one more piece of Velcro? I'm gonna put a small piece here, so he's going right about here. So everything is in. Yeah, just to hold that down. Our power cable coming from our big beefy power supply, I like to tape that down really well. Okay, so what I ended up doing is our power supply for the LEDs, I ran it all the way over to here, and I'm gonna tape it to the power cord since this is a permanent power cord. And that way we only have one wire coming off the whole thing. So let's get this up on the wall where it's gonna go and power everything up and get to the software configuration. Now that we have all the hardware installed on the television, the rest is simple software configuration. Now I've created an extremely detailed web tutorial that walks you through all of the necessary steps to get up and running. I keep that website up to date as things change, so always refer to the website if you run into any problems or questions. Now, as you're probably seeing now, the TV I chose is a much older TV with a rather large bezel around the screen. The results, of course, look much nicer on a bigger TV like this Sony 65-inch OLED that you're looking at now. As for the actual LED strip, I do recommend spending the extra few dollars on the SK6812 series of LEDs rather than the old standby WS2812. The SK series are newer, they have greater color accuracy, and they add a white LED to each pixel, further improving that color accuracy. In fact, soon I will be replacing the LEDs on the back of the Sony in the living room you saw earlier. For that very reason. Stay tuned for that video. So I hope you found this video useful or at least somewhat entertaining. Me again. I'm glad you stuck around for the bonus points, as this will answer a lot of questions I get every time I post a video about Ambilight or HyperHDR. I had to break out the SM7B for this part as I've got both 3D printers running in the background, and this mic is just excellent at rejecting background noise, so it may take up half the screen, but it's the right mic for the job. Anyway, the first point I want to make is about Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos, HDR10, all of that fun stuff. Some cheap splitters don't pass that information along to the TV. If you use my recommended splitter, there's a switch for the EDID. Now, the EDID is just a way for the TV and the source device to negotiate their capabilities. It's why, for an example, when I first turn on my TCL TV that I use as a computer monitor, it knows it's on a GeForce 4060 Ti. The two devices talk to each other. Now, note that my Samsung TV, hooked to the same computer and graphics card, does not see this extra information. That's because it's connected to a DVI port, not an HDMI port. The only reason I bring this all up is because if you're using a PC as your input device to your TV, you want to use an actual HDMI output on the PC, not a DVI to HDMI adapter. With DVI, you won't get surround sound, HDR, or any of that fun stuff. With that out of the way, on this particular splitter, you want to flip that switch to copy 1. That copies the EDID from whatever's connected to HDMI out number 1. Now, what that does is it lets the source device, your streaming device, whatever, know that your TV is capable of Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos, or maybe just Dolby 5.1, HDR10, all that other fun stuff. It lets it see that device. But more importantly, it doesn't let the source device even know about HDMI 2. Why is that important? A couple of reasons. Copy protection is one of them. If the source device sees that there's a splitter and there's another device possibly capturing video, it may block certain content. Now, we're not trying to bypass copy protection, we're just sniffing that data so we can light up some LEDs around the back of the television. That is why most splitters don't have that feature. This cheap Chinese one that I've been using for years, and I hope they continue to make them, does such a fantastic job. On the other side of the splitter, between the two HDMI ports are two little dip switches to downscale to 1080p. So you put a 4K signal in and you get 1080 out. Why would you want to do that? Well, for out 1, you don't. You want to leave that off. But for HDMI out 2, go ahead and flip that to on. See, the Raspberry Pi only really needs a small amount of data. It doesn't need 8 million pixels to light up a handful of LEDs behind the TV. So downscaling it in the splitter first puts a lot less load on the Raspberry Pi and the capture device later down the chain, and ultimately down to HyperHDR. So by starting with a 1080 signal, then each thing only has to downscale it a little bit. So we're sort of divide and conquer here. So that's just another little feature of this splitter. It's not required, but it's neat. If, like me, you want to use more than one input and still have your Hyperion show on the wall, you're going to need some kind of an HDMI switcher. I'll show you on screen the one that I use. It's very similar to this, except it's 4 in, 2 out. You can switch between the 4 inputs. You can put a game console, a PC, a streaming box, and whatever else. Blu-ray player. I don't know, and switch between the 4, sending it out to the 2 different outputs. And you can downscale one of those outputs and again copy the EDID from one of those outputs. So it works similarly to this, a little more complicated to set up, but if you want to have multiple inputs, it's a way to go, and it's what I've been using. I get great surround sound, of course I get great Dolby Vision, and HDR10, whatever the content is, it all comes straight through to the television. So whether you're using a single input for your TV or you need multiple inputs, there are options. Links, of course, are down below for both devices. Another thing I want to point out, because I get asked this all the time, is about CEC control. That's where you turn on one device and it can turn another device on. I don't have a lot of experience with CEC. My particular setup, I am using a very old Sony 5.1 home theater receiver. It has no CEC control. It doesn't even know what HDMI is. I'm feeding it through an optical input, but it works great. My point is, I have no experience with CEC, but I do know that most people say they can't get CEC control to work through this device. I don't know about the switcher. Again, no personal experience with CEC, so feel free to ask in the comments, but I won't be the one answering. There's another point I want to get out of the way, and that's about the level shifter. Now, my particular level shifter is a bit more than a simple logic level shifter. Obviously, it's able to pass power to your LEDs, to your Raspberry Pi, and even one more USB device. I just threw in an extra port because it's handy. And of course the QR code is there so that 5 years from now you want to redo it or put it on another TV, you're not going to remember what random ass YouTuber you got this idea from. So just scan that, it takes you right to my website about this guy. And scan it if you need any more information about it. There's a whole website just for this. But anyway, why do you need a level shifter? Certainly you've run WS2812s on an ESP32 and had no problems at all with the color. And an ESP32, like the Raspberry Pi, outputs a 3.3 volt logic level. Here's how TTL logic typically works. To flip from a binary 0 to a binary 1, it usually expects 2/3 of the supply voltage. In the case of 5 volts, 2/3 is 3.33 repeating, or 3 1/3 volts. That's ever so slightly above the regulated 3.3 volts coming out of the Pi or ESP32. The reason this works fine on a simple little strip that you plug into your PC or a phone charger or whatever is because if you were to measure that voltage coming off of the USB port, it's probably not exactly 5 volts. It's probably more like 4.8, 4.9. So to reach that 2/3 level, 3.3 is just right there. But we're not running a little phone charger here. We're running a big old brick that's probably putting out more like 5.1 volts. So take 2/3 of that, and now you're about 3.4 volts, 3.5 even, to get to that threshold to switch from a 0 to a 1. All that to say, a level shifter takes that 3.3 volt logic, and as soon as it sees it hit 1.8 volts, about 1.8 volts is the threshold on this guy, then it sends 5 volts out. And of course, below that, it sends 0. You get a good solid 5 volt logic going to the LED strip, eliminates any possibility of flickering or other weird unexpected behavior. That's why a level shifter. You can probably get away without it, but why take a chance? And again, there are other features to this device besides just being a level shifter that make it a lot easier. No soldering required. Everything is already connected for you. You connect your strip, you plug these on your Pi, couple USBs and a barrel plug and you're done, as you saw in the hardware installation portion. Yeah, you can get away with it on lower power devices. When you're lighting your whole wall up, you want it to look good, especially when, you know, you're showing it off to company. And just so you're aware, I don't exactly make a killing selling these things. I made them as a convenience for all the people who want to follow along on my video and don't want to have to solder or use those crimp connectors that are such a pain in the ass. This is just a solution, a little intermediary between your LED strip, your Raspberry Pi, and your power supply. That's why I sell them. Now, there is one final point I want to make, and that is a bug. I believe it's in Video for Linux, or V4L2. It's a bug within the driver for the capture device that we use, or that series of capture devices, anything with that particular chip. I'm not going to get into that bug on video here because I've got an entire section on my website. Go to my website, go to the tutorial, go to the configuration section, and scroll down to the heading where it says Quirk. So this is definitely a quirk in the system. Now, they have fixed this bug in certain versions of the Pi OS, so you may not even have to worry about it, but it is something that might occur. If your colors are way off, or if your LEDs are just ridiculously bright, or not lighting at all, it's probably because the driver has some really weird, insane defaults that almost look like large random numbers. I get into it more on the website and how to fix it. Always use the website as a resource. I try to keep my videos up to date, but I can only do a full Hyperion video maybe once a year. The website is always going to be more up to date than any video on my channel. So if this content is helpful in any way, consider becoming a patron over on Patreon, or becoming a YouTube member right here on YouTube, or making a one-time contribution down below. There are a couple of links down there. Everything's linked in the description toward the bottom. Anything goes a long way towards helping me be able to make more frequent and more high-quality content. I thank you so much for watching, especially all the way to the end here. You guys are real troopers. Either that or you fell asleep. Anyway, I really hope this video helps out. If you have any questions at all, hit that comment section below, or you can contact me directly. I prefer you use the comment section mostly because you may help other users as well, and other users can chime in where I may not know the answer. But I do read and respond to emails. Meanwhile, there's a video on your screen, probably over here, that YouTube thinks you might enjoy. So thanks for watching, and I guess check that one out.